Well, we've been hearing a lot recently about treaties, voices to Parliament, reconciliation plans, all of which at first glance seems like positive steps for our Indigenous communities, but scratch just a little below the surface and they reveal a very concerning reality. All you need to do is look towards New Zealand to see their plans for Maori co-governance. Someone who knows plenty about this is the Garrick Professor of Law at the University of Queensland and a constitutional expert and a brilliant writer, I might add, for The Spectator Australia, Professor James Allen. James, great to see you. How are you?
Thank you very much, Rowan. You too. Thanks for the kind introduction.
My pleasure. You've been freelancing. When you're not writing for The Spectator, you've gone off and freelanced and you've done a report for a New Zealand think tank, Democracy Action, which looks at the New Zealand plan to realise the UN Declaration of Rights of the Indigenous People, etc., etc. So what on earth, tell us what that is about and then tell us what your report found out about that.
Sure. So back in 2019, the Ardern Labour government in New Zealand commissioned this report on trying to bring the UN Declaration on the rights of Indigenous people into the New Zealand context, into their constitution. And it made some pretty unappetizing reading when you read its Maori name is Hei Puapua. And it's pretty unappetizing reading if you have any faith in democracy or you favor democratic decision making. It deals in group rights and identity politics. The buzzwords are co-governance, which effectively means that 15% of the population that's selected in a sort of tribal elite way will be put on the same footing as the 85% of the rest of the population. And when you read the report, it's effectively a wish list of outcomes that you'd get if you sort of had a seminar at a Maori Studies department. It was pretty bracing reading. And it effectively wants to rewrite the entire New Zealand Constitution, which is one of the great long-standing constitutions in the world. First place to give women the vote, gave Maori set-aside seats in Parliament since 1867. This is what they want to change. They want to bring in the Treaty of Waitangi. They want to have a written constitution overseen by judges. They want to bring in this, international law, UN declaration. And listeners need to know that the international law has almost no democratic credentials at all.
And what you also find, James, is, if I'm correct, the threat of special rights. Water rights are the big one that's controversial. It's called the Three Waters Plan, I believe, even potentially land rights and so on. You mentioned 15%, so that's the Maori population, 85% non-Maori population. But this 15% get all these extraordinary rights and privileges. I think it goes even so far as certain medical services and welfare services and so on. So you divide the nation in two. What, James, is the lesson for Australia out of what is happening in New Zealand?
Well, I am not a fan of the voice. As we see from New Zealand, you can't even in advance tell people how you're going to decide who gets to fall into the Maori or the Aboriginal camp. It's a license for judicial activism. Our judges in Australia don't need a license. They're already indulging in it. This will just make it worse. And the kind of people who say, and we can see from Canada, the kind of people who say, this isn't a problem, they won't have a veto. They said that in Canada with a constitutional override. And the minute it comes into the Constitution, the very same people say, you can never use this. There's no way we can override these people. We will never get a second chance after the first constitutional referendum. If it were to pass, the politicians would never give us a chance to get rid of it. It's a terrible idea, the voice, in my view, on principled grounds, on judicial activism grounds, and because empirically you can't point to a single country that has ever had good outcomes from going down a ethnic or race-based division of people. We should treat people as individuals.
I think you're 100% correct there, James. And Jennifer Oriel was saying earlier, wouldn't it be great if we could see that these sorts of measures actually gave us really good outcomes? But as you're pointing out, it certainly doesn't look that way in New Zealand, certainly not in Canada, yet Australia is determined to go down that path. James Allen, thanks so much for chatting to us on Credlin. Read you in The Spectator Australia every week.